All right. Well, this is live in 1 minute. Oh, we're live. Excellent. Welcome to 321 Gang Live. I'm your host, Mark. Today, our guest is Wayne Kaplan, America's sales leader for TBM at IBM, where he owns the go-to-market for IBM's technology business management platform, which encapsulates IT financial management, IT asset management, and strategic portfolio management. What makes Wayne a uniquely credible voice on today's topic is that his career is the arc of the TBM story. He led field sales at Flexera, the market leader in IT asset management. He spent 5 years as senior vice president of global sales at Nika Software, where the focus was on IT financial management. And since the start of 2025, he has brought all of that together at IBM, leading new business sales for the Apptio-powered TBM platform. In short, ITAM, ITFM, and now TBM unified is exactly the journey that Wayne is going to share with us today. Hey, Wayne.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Thank you for
that. My pleasure. So let's see if we have some folks still waiting. All right, let's get started.
All right. The place I always like to start when I have these presentations, and I do quite a bit of them to CIOs and their ELTs, but what's amazing to me about this number is not the size of IT spend, because it's just huge. It's larger than the GDPs of most every other major country except for a handful, right?
Right.
What's kind of amazing to me is that in today's times where there's such investments required around AI and some of the security and governance issues that are plaguing IT, this is the slowest growth rate in 20 years. And when you think about that, it's not even really keeping pace with inflation overall. So the pressure at the end of the day is, hey, if you're spending all this money, Gartner says you're wasting 20% of it. How do you really take that waste and put it to work to really helping you accomplish some of the goals that you have? And, look, at the end of the day, if you're a CIO or you're a senior IT executive, the demands have increased, and they're coming from all over the place, from above, from below, from the side, just getting inundated with requirements and requests and demands on not only your time, but your budget and also your team's time, right? So demands have increased, funding hasn't, unfortunately, and amazingly, and this is kind of the amazingly part of my TBM journey over the last couple of years, that most companies still manage IT financially manually. Spreadsheets, maybe some BI, a lot of it paper, but it's just amazing to me that for organizations that are spending all this money, they haven't really formalized how they look at IT finance or IT business management like they would from an HR or supply chain or ERP perspective. Like, it remains one of the last bastions of automation in I think, corporate America. And so when you're thinking about trying to do more with less, the analogy that I use when I kind of explain this to people is not something that I created per se, but has been shared with me by a couple of people. But if you've seen The Hurt Locker, and if you haven't, that's fine. It's a movie about what a bomb disposal unit went through in Afghanistan. And there's one scene in there, Jeremy Renner is in this big bodysuit, and he waddles up to a big box on the floor and he opens it up and there's a million wires there. Which wire does he cut? Because if he cuts the wrong wire, regardless of that suit, he's dead, right? Because that suit doesn't really protect you from the concussion, right? So at the end of the day, understanding the connection between those wires and the implication of cutting the wrong one is really important and critical to his survival. And at the end of the day, it's kind of analogous to the challenges that we face in managing information technology in most corporations. How do you connect the dots between sort of the investments that you've made, the services that have been created from those investments, if you will, that are then getting consumed by your business, and the value it's actually creating? And quite frankly, what does it cost to deliver? And putting all those pieces together at the end of the day is sort of tough to do when you're not really automating how you're looking at the business. And that's one of the reasons why TBM sort of evolved and has grown. Now, TBM Council is 20,000 plus members strong. It's been around for 20 years. But I think the most remarkable part of what TBM provides is sort of a foundational capability. It's sort of like, if I want to build a house, I need to have a really strong foundation, and technology business management gives you that foundation. It gives you a common way of looking at and describing all your costs and your spend, and then a framework to actually use to align those costs into an allocation model so that you can actually track how it's being used, consumed, and the costs associated with delivering those capabilities to the business. From our perspective at IBM, this is kind of fundamental. You have to sort of have this foundation in order to really be successful. And frankly, the research has shown that companies that haven't actually deployed these type of capabilities from an organizational perspective typically lag behind those that have. And it comes through in a lot of different ways, from how you're satisfying your customer needs to how you're finding money for the things you need to invest in, but you don't have budget, to really looking at your TCO of services that you're bringing to your customers and really matching up what it costs to deliver that value and whether it makes sense to continue it. And overall, how do you make your organization more efficient? Because at the end of the day, it's not like you're going to be adding a lot of people to your organization, right? Some of the biggest challenges now, if you get hit with a reduction, is you have to figure out, do I take it from labor? Do I look at my other costs? And without the ability of kind of putting all this stuff in context, it's really, really difficult to realign yourself around the business needs as they change.
Right. So you described TBM as a common language between technology, finance, and the business. In practice, who usually speaks that language first inside an organization? Is it IT finance, the CIO's office, or someone else?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the organization. I mean, the biggest challenge and impediment to actually deploying this is really the cultural aspect of it, right? I mean, getting people to think differently about how they look at things and forcing them into sort of a governance model, if you will, it can be really challenging. And that's why getting people involved with it early and explaining to them the value of actually adopting these capabilities is really a critical part of overall success, because it is different, right? I mean, it's very different from just tasking someone with creating a budget spreadsheet and then sharing that in the organization versus having a formalized way of how you approach it and how you categorize and how you actually allocate those costs. So the change management element of this is really pretty critical. And usually that needs a change management advocate, a champion in the organization that understands what this value is and is able to articulate it or has the support of senior leadership in order to drive it.
It's like a TBM center of excellence with a senior leader in charge.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of organizations have a practice that they have within the organization that just focuses on sort of deploying this capability, and sort of they're the owners of this process to actually make it successful and are really accountable for it overall to make sure that it's being used. So we talked a little bit about sort of TBM from a sort of market perspective. It's really, again, it's process methodology around how you look at IT finance and how do you categorize it and allocate for it. At IBM, we have sort of our own slant on this. This is really our automation strategy. We call it kind of putting TBM to work. And there's two elements of this to us. One is, we want to own the life cycle of an IT dollar from the absolute beginning, where you're sort of ideating around what you want to accomplish and who needs to be involved and what are the investments you need to make in order to do it, to the planning, budgeting, and forecasting associated with actually executing on that work, how you cost it, understanding your true cost of ownership of all the different components of it, how you actually optimize it, right? How do you make sure that it's operating in an optimized fashion? And then at the end of the day, that it's working all the time. You have resiliency built in to make sure that things are performing the way that they should, or you're getting notification, or it's getting fixed automatically based upon situations that come up. And then the last part is, hey, I want to look at everything sort of collectively. I want to look at not only my technology assets, but what are my broader assets that I have to worry about, like my buildings, my maintenance costs, all the other pieces, my physical assets like trucks and cars and things like that I may have that are part of my portfolio. How does that all factor into everything as well? So we've made significant investments over the last 10 plus years or so, spending billions of dollars building out the portfolio of capabilities that actually allow us to execute against this automation lifecycle. All right. So really, really important focus for us. We have a whole platform internally just devoted to automation capabilities. And that's where I reside as well, as part of the TBM practice.
So IBM now owns the market-leading solutions at every layer of this stack, according to the Gartner Magic Quadrant. From a customer's point of view, what does having all of these under one vendor let them do that they couldn't do when these are separate vendors?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple layers to that also. Obviously, there's a contractual element to this. Being able to negotiate everything at once through one vendor puts you in a position where you get better terms and pricing, obviously, from it, and simplifies the relationship with that vendor, right? Because when we talk about the complexities of working with a company like IBM, it's many. I mean, we have all these different entitlements. They're really challenging to keep track of, and by having it all into one ownership, it makes it a lot easier to do business with IBM. The other element of it is there's an element of sort of data sharing that goes on between these platforms that I'll talk about later. But by being able to be tightly connected from the data layer, and maybe not necessarily from the application layer, but from the data layer, allows us to actually get a lot of insights that would be much more difficult if all these products were actually owned separately and they were out there on their own, sort of siloed in the marketplace. So again, the ease of doing business, the ability to leverage data collectively to form new insights are really probably the two greatest benefits that organizations get from working with us around this solution offering. Now, when we talk about TBM specifically, which is what my responsibilities are, it really kind of falls into sort of three core elements. One of them is IT asset management, which I'll talk about a little bit later. FinOps, which everyone's familiar with, I think, at this point, the concept of actually managing cloud spend and really optimizing that spend to prevent sprawl, et cetera, from occurring and financial loss. And then there's the IT financial management component of it. And what I'm going to take you through is like these all come together to provide really a very different perspective of how you kind of look at your investments as it relates to the value that they're creating in the business and whether or not that value is being supported by the cost of actually providing it, right? So, and typically where I start this conversation is understanding the concept of spend versus cost, because for many organizations, when they think about cloud spend, a lot of it is around sort of what are you consuming and the spend associated with that consumption, and also obviously there's an operational element of sort of how do you actually execute against it that goes with the FinOps side. But when you think about, I like to use this analogy because to me it's pretty illustrative. But when I think about whether or not I want to go out to dinner or cook something at home, I kind of do the analysis. And I mean, I'm taking quite a liberty here and kind of doing this, but I think it illustrates it pretty nicely. Like if I just wanted to focus on the spend associated with building that dinner for my wife and I would look at what were my sort of non-labor direct costs. What were my ingredients that I put in play in order to actually make that dinner? And I would run through this whole list of things, right? And at the end of the day, it cost me $25, give or take, right? So if I was making decisions about whether to go out or cook at home, if I just looked at this level, it's a very easy decision to make. It's half as expensive or almost 2/3 less expensive to cook at home versus going out and spending $70 in a restaurant. However, when I take a look at the fully allocated costs associated with actually delivering that, it's a very different picture. And again, you can argue with the math and the pricing and all that other stuff, and you can say it's sunk costs and not sunk costs, but at the end of the day, there are implications here of this that a lot of times we don't actually factor into our decisioning. And ultimately, that's what IT financial management is about, is sort of saying, hey, let's put the whole picture together, my labor, non-labor, my direct, indirect, and let's take a real hard look at actually what does it cost for me to deliver something that's being consumed in the business. So if I do the math and I take a look at the analysis, right, if I factor in everything that goes along with it and value it, it winds up becoming almost twice as expensive to cook at home than it is about going out. And again, I get into discussions with people about this and they challenge me on it, but it misses the point. The point is, what could I have been doing with that 4 hours of time that I spent cooking that dinner? This is really about lost opportunity cost. So if I do the analysis and I understand the differences, and if the differences are this great, I have to look at, hey, how could I be using my time and resources differently in order to do something else that could have a higher priority? And I think that's what's missing when you start looking at the world through a spreadsheet or just a point in time. You don't get a really good sense overall of sort of what is the mix that goes into really making this either valuable or not valuable. And if it's not valuable, what else could I be doing with that time to really get better efficiency out of my time or the dollars that I'm spending in the organization? So in my mind, just make reservations.
Right. How often do you walk into a client and find them looking at the $25 number and declaring victory?
I mean, often. And so they'll say that we're already doing that. But then when you dig in deeper and you really understand how they're looking at those allocations and where they're getting that data from, they're missing components of it that's actually giving them a false perspective of what the costs are. Most organizations that don't automate with a good foundational element like a TBM, and they don't have the tools that exploit that capability to show them sort of that visibility into it, have difficulty really connecting the dots between spend, cost, return on investment, and being able to make decisions. It's just too hard. It's too hard to.
So when you show a true cost number to a business unit leader for the first time, what's their typical reaction? Are they in denial? Do they get angry?
They'll challenge it, and a lot of times it's more of a frustration that they didn't understand that before. Like, and I think this, I get asked sometimes, well, don't senior leaders not want to actually share this information with people? I mean, it's when I work with salespeople, they'll basically say, well, our customers don't really want to know this. They don't want people to know that they're not being efficient. And I think the opposite is quite true. I mean, I think at the end of the day, transparency is kind of fundamental to trust. And a big challenge that IT organizations have, especially because they're spending a lot of times the business unit's money in executing on what they're trying to accomplish, is sort of that trust element. What IT financial management does is provides visibility into that relationship between investment, how it transforms into a service, how it gets consumed, and the costs associated with that, and the value it's providing. It provides a really clear path, both going up that chain and down that chain, to basically defend how you're consuming dollars and the services that you're providing. So having that visibility is really, really important to actually creating a better relationship with the people that you're supporting, and helps you actually achieve the things that you want to do when you go back and ask for more money, because they trust that you're using that money properly and they are getting business value from your previous investments.
So service consumption visibility is really a cultural change.
It is, and it isn't. Like, so there are two sort of elements to that. One is sort of what's called showback, which is you're showing how it's being consumed and the costs associated with it. And that really, what that does is it creates a discussion. And companies try to do that today with spreadsheets, but a lot of times they can't actually defend it because they can't go deep enough, the granularity aspect of it, to really show sort of the fundamental elements that are driving it. So that's one side of it. And most organizations that deploy IT financial management will actually do showback. They'll create a relationship where they're actually being very transparent around how they're consuming cost in the business and the value it's creating. Some organizations want to take it further and say, I want to charge you back for that now. It's very common in the government, where they want to basically take money back from agencies that are consuming grants and things of that nature, because they have to report that to the federal government. But most organizations kind of draw that line where they may not deploy chargeback, because when we talk about cultural change, there's cultural change getting to showback and being able to get people to actually engage in that process and adopt these concepts. And then the next piece is, hey, now I want to start taking your budget. And that becomes sort of a different and a more challenging conversation. And I would say that most companies don't find the need to go all the way to that level where they're doing full chargeback.
Makes sense.
So the components of IT financial management are pretty straightforward, and I've touched on these already. Align it around what you're trying to accomplish, understand the cost to deliver it or own it, rent it, operate it, and then really share it with people. Be transparent, create trust in that relationship, show them how it's being consumed and the value it's creating, so that when you are trying to make cuts, or you are trying to take from your operating budget to put into your investment or your tech debt or your initiatives around AI or some of the other things you're trying to do, you can justify that you've been a good steward of those expenses and you've been using whatever the budgets are very judiciously, and you can defend that, right? And then you want to use it to actually find the waste, right? So a lot of times companies will look at IT financial management purely as a cost savings tool, because it will find really the waste in the organization, just like asset management will. What happens is, once you find the waste, your relationship kind of changes with the solution. Now it becomes really governance, risk management, and compliance. Right. So companies that don't really adopt TBM as a business model and don't dedicate to the methodology from a functional perspective, aligning people to actually, be responsible for it, what happens is, once the savings are actually, received, they kind of step away from it. They lessen the commitment to it, and they find themselves in the same situation again, where they can't really create a visibility into that sort of investment, service, consumption, cost, value.
Right. So how do you know when a customer's actually crossed that line? They've achieved what's called escape velocity.
I'm sorry.
So how do you know when someone, like when you're working with a client and they're going through the process of adopting TBM? At what point do you see that they're actually starting to pick up momentum?
Well, I mean, I think it comes down to the level of formalization of their program. Have they put a program in place where this is becoming sort of their formal operating model?
Right.
Companies that make this their formal operating model are the most successful with leveraging these types of capabilities. Not only the business aspect of it from a process methodology standpoint, but also from a tools standpoint. Because you got to remember, there's all different sorts of tools that go along with actually delivering technology business management, right? This is the first one I'm focusing on, just sort of the base financial elements of it, but there's operational improvements and automation. There's the cloud side as well. So this is just one piece. You need an overarching framework in order to actually kind of pull all this stuff together and make it really relevant, right? So
Right.
companies that actually formalize this into, really an approach and a program tend to be the ones that find the most success with it. And you'll find this a lot in organizations that are constantly going through pivots. They're changing all the time. They're early adopters. They're trying to find ways of funding things that they want to do that are sort of differentiating themselves from their customers. I'm sorry, from their competitors.
Yep. Makes sense.
So just to give a different perspective, and this is my personal view of the world and IBM's perspective as well, I guess, to a certain extent. But to me, ITFM is sort of it's like the data vacuum that you put in your organization that sucks up all the spend data that gets generated. And then through the model, through using TBM as a sort of the basic foundationals, it's able to basically cost all that spend. It'll normalize it. It'll then rationalize it, and then it'll create TCO for it so that you know what these different services are costing that you're providing through all these different types of capabilities. And then it can send that information back to those applications so that they can do a better job of actually creating insights into how to best leverage the automation that are contained in those tools as well. So it's really a bi-directional relationship, but by pulling all that spend together, again, back to the comment that you made before, sort of why IBM, because we're pulling all this information together for our own products, but we're also pulling in information from the Oracles and the SAPs and the ServiceNows and all the other solutions that are out there that generate spend data and cost data, and then putting it all together in one place where it can be basically contextualized. And when it's contextualized, you can leverage it in other places.
Right. So what's the most common data source that's either missing or wrong when you first show up? And is it usually a tool problem or an org problem?
I mean, I think it's probably both. I mean, I think most organizations do a good job of discovery. They've got multiple discovery tools. There's an old adage that says, you can never have too much discovery, right? So there's tons and tons of discovery data out there, and making sense of it all is a part of what this will do, as well as the asset management side that we'll talk about in a minute. So I don't think that data is necessarily the problem from a sourcing perspective. I think from an access perspective, it gets a little challenging, is people giving you access to the data when you're rolling this stuff out. I also think that accuracy is an issue, like really understanding whether or not the data is accurate or not. And that's a big part of rolling these capabilities out from a tool perspective, is going through, looking at the sources, understanding the challenges in getting it, and then looking at the accuracy of it, and making sure that when you're loading this thing up initially before you automate the feeds, that you've really done a good job of actually making sure it's accurate, right? And so, again, it's really access and also accuracy are really kind of the two biggest things. Now, you don't need all these sources to be successful. I mean, if you can get the GL data, you can get some of the spend data from some of the applications, you can get started with this. I mean, you could roll out TBM without it rolling out ITFM, right? You can just kind of put these methodologies in place and create a program and execute this as best you can if you wanted to use a spreadsheet. But it's only going to take you so far. And when you start automating it using IT financial management, you really get a much broader benefit where you're able to sort of integrate all these other pieces to it and give it real context to allow you to get to really ultimately, for some organizations, I want to know unit cost. Like, what does it cost for me to deliver a policy if I'm an insurance company? What does it cost for me to take a patient in my hospital, or to deliver that sonogram, or deliver that radiology? Like, that's where you can get to with this. But unless you have all the building blocks in place and you have the methodology around it, you've got that good process, you're never going to get there. You'll never understand. It'll just be guesswork, and that becomes problematic. I throw this in here, and again, I don't want to offend anybody. I know there's a lot of very knowledgeable people on this call, but as I explain this, because I do a lot of enablement to the IBM sales organization, this is sort of what it's like. I mean, at the end of the day, your utility company operates from a TBM model effectively. They make investments, they basically transform those investments into a consumable service, which we then take in our home and we run our house with it, lighting, electricity, whatever, air conditioning, heating. They're tracking our consumption. They understand their true costs because they're looking at both labor, non-labor, direct, indirect. And then effectively, based upon our consumption and their costs, they issue us a bill. Imagine if the utility company just sent you a bill without itemizing your consumption.
Right.
That's what goes on in IT and basically in every corporate organization today. It's like you're basically asking people to trust you when you give them a report from a spreadsheet that doesn't show all the details of everything being itemized. It becomes a source of contention, a source of distrust that can very easily be solved by deploying, obviously, the methodology as well as the tooling capabilities. So that's the model, basically. It's like, hey, I had these investments. I converted it to something that can be consumed because people don't consume coal or oil in their house. They consume the output of that, which is electricity. I'm going to monitor how much you're using. I'm going to tell you how much it costs to deliver it and consume it, and then I'm going to charge you for it. So from an Apptio perspective and an IBM perspective, we consider these kind of multiple products to be financial management. We've got the portfolio side, which I talked about, planning and costing, billing, benchmark, all these things come together. However, you don't have to deploy everything at once. And which is kind of the beauty of this is once you deploy the framework and the methodology and you commit to actually executing against it, you can pick the places which make the most sense to you so that you don't have to eat the whole apple. You can focus on the things that are going to give you the best return in the shortest amount of time, right? Because again, you're going to probably fund this with savings, right? And then you're going to convert to governance, risk management, and compliance through your people, process, and technology. But you don't have to take it all at once. You can really focus on what makes the most sense. And I'll talk a little bit about how this kind of rolls out in a minute.
So if a customer only has the budget and political capital to stand up one of these four in year one, which one delivers the fastest payback and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think planning and costing. I mean, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but you have to understand your costs. And you have to understand your allocation model. Because if you can't do those two things, which are probably the most difficult thing to do with spreadsheets, you're going to have a difficult time really understanding that relationship between what you bought, deployed, consumed, how much it costs, and the business value. So typically, planning and costing is a great place to start. You can see returns very quickly. I mean, and I'll talk to this in a minute, but automating your planning cycle is like nirvana. When you think about how much time organizations spend on their planning cycles, it's just ridiculous. Like, 3 months to do a planning cycle where there's 100 people involved and they're spending 2 hours a day. I mean, it's like, do the math. Like when I get on a board and I kind of lay out, what does it actually cost for you to actually do your planning, budgeting, forecasting cycles? And oh, by the way, by the time you actually deliver it, your forecast is wrong, right? Because all your costs have changed. The model has changed. You're not keeping track with it because it's pretty static. So it's a really dynamic thing that you're trying to do. And if you don't automate it, you're going to miss the dynamicism of it. And it'll prevent you from being able to make decisions that you normally would make by having the visibility into it. So that's typically where people start. However, some companies want to know, hey, I want to look at my benchmark. How's my IT spend compared to my competitors? So it can really start anywhere. It really depends upon the client, but typically planning and costing is where to start.
So when it comes to benchmarking, it's a powerful and could be dangerous in equal measure. What's the mistake CIOs make most often when they compare themselves to peers, picking the wrong peer group or reading the right peer group the wrong way?
I think a lot of times when you think about different businesses and similar businesses, if we're both running hospital networks, what we do is pretty much the same. But how we do it is really different. And right. So when you start using and looking at benchmarking, you have to be careful that you factor in the how. Because every business sort of runs differently, even though it does the same things, how they actually execute against it can be very, very different. So one company may be investing heavily in AI. One company may not be. One company may be moving 100% to the cloud. Another company may not be. So it really kind of depends upon, where they are and how they're actually executing their plan. That's why benchmarking is good from a sort of high level perspective, but then you got to dig in deeper and make sure that, hey, is it apples to apples? Is our strategy the same as theirs? How we're executing on things? And that comes out as part of the sort of engagement process that we work with customers as we look at really what are they trying to accomplish and what are the priorities and really how's that translating to outcomes. And so a lot of times, benchmarking is a tool in that capability to understand, but it isn't necessarily the target.
Right. And most organizations don't have a handle on the unit economics of AI spend yet.
I think it's a big black hole. And again,
Right.
when we look at it from an Aptio perspective, we can actually help you understand not only where your commitments are today, but how to plan for tomorrow. And I'm hearing this really more and more and more when I'm having these conversations. This is turning out to be the sort of the number one concern at the C-suite is at the end of the day, what are my commitments here and what should I expect in return? And I think it's really difficult because some of this stuff is just so new and it's changing so frequently to really understand, hey, if I automate my HR, which we've done at IBM, I mean, we use Watson to basically run our automation around when I engage HR and I engage IT and I engage lead, it's all being driven on the back end by Watson. However, you just don't get rid of all the people behind there because there's still going to be questions that come up. There's process issues that come up. There's things that need to be addressed. So AI is not a panacea for every expense that you have in your organization as it relates to labor or technology. It has to be used in the right place at the right time to solve the right problem. And we can help you kind of figure that out by understanding what those costs are when you start to model some of this stuff. So it becomes more of your planning process as you're thinking about from a strategic level, what are you trying to accomplish? How do I leverage understanding the TCO of that to really make better decisions around, first of all, where I want to put it, how much do I want to run through it, what guardrails do I want to put in place so it doesn't create sprawl and then create unplanned expenses, which is really the number one, I think, threat to any IT organization is getting hit with unplanned expenses because it just throws a wrench in everything that you're doing.
Right. And how is value measured? What are the KPI?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of it. Like not understanding how you're going to measure it is really pretty critical, right?
For sure.
So what comes up a lot of times I get asked, hey, when's the right time to do this? I mean, if you're spending money and you don't understand how it's being consumed and the value it's creating, it's the right time.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't understand that cycle, that business cycle, and you can't really understand what's contributing to it and can't sort of articulate the value of it, I think you're in a situation where you need to sort of step back and look at formalizing this. And really, at the end of the day, it's really understanding that relationship that I mentioned before. Look, these are the investments that I've made. These are the services that I'm delivering from those. These are the people that are using it and how much they're using it and what it costs for them to consume it. And then this is the value it's creating to the business. This is the revenue it's generating. This is how it's executing against the business strategy, whatever the case may be. Getting to that point, if you're not really embracing good process, good methodology, good tooling, is going to be really, really difficult to do. So when's the right time to embrace it? When you want to get that visibility and when you want to be able to really quickly make decisions around where can I take from my run, where can I find my flexible spend, and start applying that to parts of the organization where I'm going to get better value or be able to address the tech debt that I have that's been building up over the years because of the fact that we've been fighting this budget battle in technology for quite a few years now.
And CIO is basically maintaining a slush fund that is a buffer for unexpected spend, which is actually a symptom of not having TBM in place.
So I've been selling for a long time, more than I'll share on this call. But at the end of the day, Q4 is our best quarter. Why? Why is Q4 the best quarter for salespeople in technology? Because that's when the slush fund becomes available. That's where that unallocated budget gets basically deployed. And my comeback to that is why? If you really understood how to apply value to those dollars and can actually execute against it because you understood your risks, your governance, your compliance, you understood that stuff, you could plan for more effectively. Why wouldn't you want to put that capital to work earlier? What would it have meant to actually deploy my capabilities at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year?
Right.
How could that have transformed the business? That is a lost opportunity cost, and it's called capital inefficiency. And when you adopt these strategies and these capabilities from a tooling perspective, you put yourself in a much more proactive position to be able to really impact the business than you can by just setting aside money to basically protect your unplanned, expenses. Right? There's just a better way of doing it, and
Right.
that's what you're really trying to find.
I can imagine it would be uncomfortable to not have the slush fund, just changing that. But you fund this solution with the savings, and then you have a greater visibility into the value that each dollar generates.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all kind of keep slush funds in our personal budgets, right? We keep money in there. Look, we keep extra dollars in our checking account, and we don't know when we're going to have to do an oil change, whatever the case may be. We keep money set aside, and I'm not saying you don't keep set asides, but the dollar value of those, when you actually release it, what triggers the release, you have to just manage it better. You have to manage it from the perspective more scientifically rather than. Let me back that up. You have to be more proactive in how you're using that versus reactive. And that's really ultimately the point. And the sooner you can put that capital to use, overall, the bigger business impact you're going to have overall from a delivering value perspective. This comes up all the time. I mean, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but at the end of the day, people run their businesses on spreadsheets. And to me, sure, I mean, there's value there, of course. It gives you some visibility into it, but you haven't really institutionalized that knowledge. So whoever created the spreadsheet, when they leave, now you have to figure out how it works. And people make changes to it. They don't document it. Now it doesn't run like it should. And I haven't been in one situation that of an account that I've walked into that when they looked at their spreadsheets before they started to automate, that data was actually accurate. So at the end of the day, I mean, when you look at really automating this and sort of providing more institutional capability around it, what you're really doing is putting efficiency into that model and visibility that you normally wouldn't get without a lot of effort. And at the end of the day, you're creating a better collaborative product and process to be able to get work done than you had just by sharing a spreadsheet around the organization. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to sort of shrink common practices like budgeting, forecasting, et cetera, around using automation to actually standardize that approach. And limit the amount of input that you need from others in the organization to do that and do it more consistently. I mean, I've been in situations where people will budget once a year. I mean, I could imagine budgeting my home expenses once a year. They change every day. Now, why would you do it once a year? Because the process of actually gathering all that information is just so onerous and it takes so much time that you have to be more pragmatic. You try to do the best you can. You set that budget and you plan and forecast against that and try to execute. So it does change the way you look at how you actually plan, budget, forecast, and really execute. So it's really important that you do that.
And managing this with static spreadsheets does not help your organization go from being reactive to proactive. It doesn't give them the ability to understand impact of their decision process in near real time or real time.
It doesn't. I mean, anecdotally, one of my first business meetings at Flexera, I went to a large P&C company, and we're talking about asset management, obviously, and so we asked them how do you manage all your entitlements today? And they call in this woman who's been doing it for 35 years. She's getting ready to retire. She pulls in this giant stack of papers in her computer, and she opens up her spreadsheet. This is $1.5 billion technology budget from a software perspective. They're spending $1.5 billion, and they're managing all their entitlements in a bunch of paper and spreadsheets. And by the way, this woman's retiring. She's the only one that knows where the connections are.
Right.
That happens more than you think. It happens more than you think. And I think that, again, it's an opportunity. And it's not just about the technology. It's really about the operating model and methodology. It's by really approaching this more methodically, you can actually put strategies in place to help you put your arms around all this stuff that become really survivable. And that's really important as well, because you want to preserve this because it makes it a lot easier to scale. It makes it a lot easier to actually have people leave and take other roles when you've actually standardized on this stuff in a process and a tool set. So can you just build it yourself? Sure. Could you use a BI friend with it? Sure. But at the end of the day, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's like, Mark, when I look at a spreadsheet and I see data, the conclusions that I will draw from that data can be vastly different from yours. And when I
So
put a BI layer on top of it, it's the same thing. I'm going to look at those graphs. I'm going to draw my own conclusions based upon my experiences and my understanding of the data. You're going to do the same thing. So yes, it's a prettier way of looking at the data, and yeah, you'll get some insights from it, but it really doesn't drive behavioral changes, which is what automation can actually do. And that's really what you're looking for, is to drive behavioral changes, right? You're trying to change the culture. It just doesn't do it. And this gets borne out when you talk to people that have actually walked away from this. And we have a number of examples of companies that tried to do this, had a core spreadsheet in the BI and tried to basically deliver it. And they weren't getting the results they were looking for. They couldn't get where they needed to get to. They were still getting surprised. And that's what this is kind of all about. So we've walked the walk here. I mean, one of the reasons why we bought Aptio was that we brought them in-house. And we did a whole transformation within IBM where we basically looked at every operating system, every business solution. We looked at everything associated with delivering IT within IBM. And using Aptio and using Flexera, we found huge amounts of initial savings that we're able to take out of our budget by eliminating things we weren't using, consolidating stuff that was actually sprawled all over the place, finding shadow IT. But we also created standards. And we use TBM as a way of formalizing that methodology. So while we don't get the savings every year because we've already realized all that stuff, we have put an operating model in place that actually guides how we make investments, how we look at investments, how we qualify investments, and how we actually govern the use of those investments within the organization. So we do eat our own dog food here. We've been very successful with it. And we have access to the people that have actually done this. I've been in meetings with the people that have actually architected this and went through the whole process, and they're available to share their experiences and how they transformed IBM's sort of back-end solutions and services to really address a lot of waste that was going on within our business. So take the journey with us. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. We have a lot of expertise in this. I mean, our Aptio team is like highly, highly knowledgeable about how to actually transform with IT financial management. We have a very close working relationship with the TBM Council. They are a separate organization. They originally started with Aptio way back when, 15, 20 years ago, whatever it was, but they are now, independent out there, really helping companies understand sort of the what and the why, and the FinOps side takes care of the how. And so FinOps and TBM are really working closely together. The TBM Council and the FinOps Foundations have a very close working relationship because they complement each other. You don't have to give up one for the other. They actually work together really well to help you put a fully encompassed capability into the organization. So what we want to help you do is really take that journey with us. We'll help you go through it. And we have sort of a process. Is this the only process to use? No, it's not. Yet there's many different ways of approaching this. This is just our way of sort of getting an initial sense of, look, if you're in a situation where you've got sort of needs about modernizing, where you've got to make investments, but you just don't have an ever expanding budget, we can help you figure out how to look at that run, find the variable expense that you can take out of it, and then redirect that into the investments that you need to make. We can help you modernize with flat budgets and or reduce budgets. And as I said before, the first step is you have to know your costs. You have to know what this stuff is actually costing you. If you don't, you're really flying blind. You're making decisions about, hey, I want to move this to the cloud. Well, if you don't understand your true costs of running that service and the value it's actually creating in the business, well, how do you know if running it on the cloud is the right solution? Because running on cloud is expensive. In a lot of cases, it's more expensive than running it in your data center. If you know,
especially with AI, with AI.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about this in a minute, but the mainframe has become an incredible vehicle for actually deploying LLMs and agentic, right? So it's really, how do you know the right resource for the right capability? Well, you have to really understand your costs from the beginning and have some operating model to actually allocate them through in order to really tie them directly to business value. So first step is know your costs. That's why we say a lot of times, hey, costing and planning, that's where you start. Understand your costs, know your allocations, and then put it to work through your budgeting process. You'll get some real results from that, and then start to expand out and take on some of these more capabilities as you mature your journey. So know your costs. Next, consolidate your sprawl. I mean, you probably, even though you've got 10 discovery solutions out there, you still have no idea around sprawl in your organization. You have to consolidate that. is probably the fastest way to find a return on savings in your IT asset portfolio is by deploying tools like Flexera. That this is a specific product called IT Visibility, but its main purpose is it'll take all the discovery data that you have as well as its own. It'll pull all that stuff together to make sense of it. It'll normalize the data and then create an ability to do application rationalization. So you can move stuff out that you shouldn't have in there, shadow IT. You might have versions of product that are outdated, maybe end of life. It'll go through all that stuff and help you get rid of it. From an Apptio perspective, it'll help you understand what the cost associated with that is. So it'll also do normalization and rationalization, but it does it from the financial perspective, helping you understand really where your risks are as it relates to having those things in your environment and what happens if you take it out, how can that impact you? So the two solutions together really can make a huge difference in sort of getting your arms around this sprawl. But once you find those savings, the analogy that I use to this is sort of, hey, tomorrow if I lost my job, God forbid, I lost my job, the first thing I would do was I would look at my fixed expenses, I'd look at my variable expenses, and then I would look at my sort of aspirational expenses. And I just start cutting the stuff which I couldn't tie to value. Like I can't get rid of my mortgage, I can't get rid of my car payment, I can't get rid of my insurance, but that vacation, that's gone. Like that's off the table. The clothing I was going to buy, gone. Like I would be finding all the immediate places where I could cut out of my personal budget. However, in month 2, I don't have that anymore.
Right.
So now what I'm doing is really putting governance in place, risk management in place, compliance in place to make sure that I don't put myself in a situation where I'm spending more than my income. And that's exactly how you have to look at these capabilities. You're going to basically get your arms around all this stuff. You're going to find the savings that are there. You're going to put models in place to control the sprawl. So the next month or the next year, the value proposition isn't savings, it's cost avoidance. It's preventing you from creating that sprawl again, preventing you from creating vulnerabilities, preventing you from putting yourself in a situation where you could get audited and not really be able to defend yourself. You had a question?
It makes sense. So just keeping it in place to manage the risk of sprawl, of drift, right? So it's not a one-time exercise, right? This is continuous. This is part of governance.
It is big time. And another value proposition from this, and this comes up all the time, is our customers complain about their CMDBs. What they complain about is they're just not accurate. Because the difficulty in getting the data normalized and rationalized in there and making it really useful for automation, it's really tough. Side benefit of this is that it will generate really high quality, trusted data to populate the CMDB, and it'll do it all the time. You can automate that process so that ultimately at the end of the day, you know that the data in your CMDB is accurate at any point in time, which allows you to start deploying automation that you couldn't do before because you didn't trust the data. Right. So really significant benefit to this that more than outweighs, the fact that you're not getting savings on a day-to-day basis. Now you're providing real value that you can measure as it relates to automating other parts of your business. So next step is, and everyone really understands this, I got to optimize my cloud. So I got to understand where I'm spending, what it's costing, how do I really put my arms around it from a governance, compliance, risk management perspective. I have to find ways of really optimizing that environment and really making sure that what I'm putting out there should be there. And what's out there is running most optimally. And we have a number of tools that can help you do this. And where you start really depends upon where you are on your journey. If you just need baseline visibility into multiple, hosting environments that you're running and what it's actually costing you, Cloudability is a great tool. If you want to automate the sizing of containers and how you're running Kubernetes and all that stuff, we have other tools that help you put automation around that as well. But we can give you a complete capability from a FinOps perspective to actually automate your cloud environments. Some of that now is migrating also to your on-prem environments. Like Turbo will actually optimize your on-prem environments as well. So this is a big part in sort of getting your arms around, your costs, your risks, your governance, all that stuff. And again, this flows through your cost model. This flows through your automation model. So TBM will give you 100% of your spend, including cloud. These are the tools that help you manage it long term and allow you to really automate it so you can make it the most efficient as possible from a not only technology perspective, but also from a labor perspective. Then you want to kind of simplify. And we talked about it before. A lot of times you may not start with budgeting. You may not start with planning. I mean, obviously you got a cost, but this is a great opportunity to sort of optimize how you go through your planning process. Like how you're doing your projects, how you're tying this to your strategic portfolio. What are the key services you're trying to provide, and how does this actually connect? How do the costs kind of flow through here so that when you know at the end of the day, when you're doing your planning, you have real actual cost. You can assign real cost to those from the budget into your planning cycles, and then do a better job of forecasting accurately. This is something that a lot of organizations do. They may not do it first, they may do it a little bit later, but it helps really optimize that environment and give you the efficiencies that you're looking for. And the kind of the last piece to this is one of the most important, actually, overall. There's one more to this, but I think a lot of times what happens around asset management is people get audited. And really why they get audited is because they don't understand a very simple relationship. What you bought, what you deployed, what you consumed, the cost of that consumption, and what you're entitled to. And companies like IBM make it really, really difficult to actually manage this. It's the number one source of contention with our clients is that, hey, you audited me and you found my overcommitment. And the reality is that's not our fault. Right. It's our customers' fault because they didn't deploy governance. They didn't deploy risk management. They didn't deploy compliance around how they're managing their software assets. And we're talking about both SaaS as well as obviously on-prem, right?
Right.
We have.
So
go ahead.
So how much of the ROI from ITIM comes from audit avoidance or contract optimization or eliminating software?
So there's a short, medium, and long-term benefit from this, right? The short-term benefit and really the medium-term benefit is what's called harvesting. Like, hey, when I hire new people, do I go out and just buy a new computer and buy all new software? I mean, most organizations do. What you don't understand is that when you buy that Microsoft Office, you might have 5 use rights where you can put that software on 5 different computers. So the concept of harvesting is really kind of critical when you think about software asset management. Like if I can give you the ability to actually apply your entitlements, your bank of entitlements, your bank of licenses into your hire process and your refresh process, you can start actually saving tons and tons of money as you look at some of these expenses associated with bringing new people on board or basically modernizing their equipment, right? So that's one element of it. The other one is, at the end of the day, if I understand my consumption model and the costs associated with that, if I understand that, when I go and negotiate my next contract with my vendor, it puts me in a better position to actually have a better conversation, right? There are some vendors that make you buy for everybody, but I don't want to buy for everybody because not everybody is going to use it. So if you can't actually show that, it's very difficult to have that conversation with your vendor.
Right.
So while it won't save you money in your current cycle, because no one's going to change their contract mid-cycle, it'll help you prepare for that conversation when it comes due, when you either go for your renewal or you basically make a new commitment, whatever. So it'll help you go through and understand it. It'll also help you understand at the end of the day, as it relates to the number of different vendors you're working with, shrinking that down. So it'll help you with your consolidation effort as well, and really help you understand where the value is getting created and who's really using stuff in your environment. Working with the IT visibility product, which is actually, looking at it from a data perspective. So those two put together and help you optimize. And the last one is, and we've kind of talked about this ad nauseum a little bit, so I'll kind of get off my high horse here, but at the end of the day, when you deploy these capabilities, it's really a combination of people, process, technology, right? From an operating perspective, in order to give you the visibility, the predictability, in order to help you find, basically flexible spend in your organization continuously. Like at any point in time, it changes, right? Based upon consumption, based upon costs, based upon where it's operating. There's all these different components that go into it. What IT finance can do, what TBM allows you to do, what some of these other tools allow you to do is really create an operating model that you can actually use to manage the business of IT and allow you to not get surprised. And again, like when you think about why people get in trouble at the C-level, it's like they get these surprises in their budgets that they either can't fund it or they over budget and they're being held accountable for it. So let's help our companies, help our prospects, help the people that we work with do a better job of really. I'll use the analogy. Think about it from the perspective if you went out to your car, and the only way you could drive was using your rearview mirror. All your other windows were blocked out. You wouldn't get very far because you'd only see where you've been. You wouldn't know where you need to go. And the difference between sort of flying blind with spreadsheets and sort of doing things ad hoc is you're in that car with a rearview mirror. What these tools and capabilities, people process, methodologies, business model allow you to do is it's like having a Tesla with full spatial awareness. You know where everything is around you. You know the risks that they present, the person crossing the street. You see the truck stopped in front of you. You'll know to avoid it. It'll put predictability. It'll put visibility into what you're trying to accomplish. It'll make your relationship much more proactive in how you're actually running the business than just trying to look out the rearview mirror all the time and try to
right. And manage that variability for your CFO.
And for the people that you're supporting. I mean, because
right.
the business unit owners want to make sure that they're using their funds correctly also, right? So it's a connected workplace, and what these tools will do is really bring all the pieces together. So a big way that we start with this is actually sort of doing what we call a strategy workshop. We'll come in and sit down with you, working with 321 gang and sit down and really understand your current state, how you're working today, identify some of the gaps that you have in doing that. What are some of your aspirations that you want to accomplish? And then help you kind of lay out a plan once we qualify, which are the ones that are going to make the most difference, and kind of lay out a sort of crawl, walk, run plan for you to actually execute. So we do these all the time. It's something that we actually find has a lot of value for our prospects. Even if you don't actually move forward with us, at least you'll get some ideas on things you can do differently. But at the end of the day, they help you uncover some of the things that you may not have had awareness for, because we're bringing our experience with all these other customers doing this into helping, bring that knowledge to you so that you can do a better job of managing your environment.
Right. And quoting Christine Schotel of IBM, focus on progress over perfection.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a big part of it. Big part of it. So that's my spiel.
Excellent. So we have 2 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, you can drop them in the chat there. We will be providing a link to the full session to everybody that registered. And we invite you to engage IBM and 321 Gang to get an understanding of how we can help you save some money
and put
efficiencies.
Better business model in place to help you manage it going forward.
Sure. Yep. Exactly. All right. So no questions right now. Vineet, thank you for your comment there.
I can't see any of them. So.
All right. So focusing on the low-hanging fruit, he says, this series is spot on with the framework I've described in my upcoming book, The CIO's Guide to Enterprise FinOps, Unlock Operational Savings to Bootstrap Your Innovation and Transformation. Vineet, if you would like to do a LinkedIn Live session and talk about your book at some point in the future, would be happy to sit down with you and have that conversation. Cool. All right, sir. I think that's a wrap.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it. We look forward to connecting with us so that we can have some really substantial conversations around how to improve how you're running your environment. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
All right. Now the stream is